All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a moment. I'm going to give folks just a second to trickle in. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's program. My name is Olivia Cano, and I'm the Community Engagement and Events Manager for the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. I want to start by thanking you all for joining us for today's webinar, and I just want to kick things off with a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's program is a webinar format, which means attendees will not have their cameras on or microphones enabled. Additionally, today's program will be recorded and sent out to all registered attendees after the program. We have a really incredible lineup of speakers today, and we encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask questions during the program. We're proud to partner with Accenture to bring you their Technology Vision 2024 report. And again, I just want to thank you all for taking time out of your morning to join us today. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to GSEC board member and Accenture's Managing Director, Mark Noriega, for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Olivia. For the last 24 years, Accenture's been putting out a technology vision, which has taken a systemic approach to looking across the enterprise landscape and identifying trends that we believe have the highest likelihood to disrupt businesses and industries. These trends will challenge us to rethink our strategies, practices, and values, and how we can leverage them to create a positive human impact. We will share some insights and recommendations from our global survey of more than 6,000 businesses and IT executives across 31 countries and 18 industries. We will also showcase some of the inspiring examples of how organizations are already applying these trends to transform their businesses and organizations to deliver value to their clients, customers, employees, and stakeholders. The theme of this year's technology vision is human by design. This idea reflects that technology is not only a tool or a solution, but also an extension of an expression of who we are as humans. We hope this session will inspire you to think differently and boldly and to embrace the opportunities and challenges these trends present. We invite you to join us in the conversation and share your thoughts and questions throughout the session. And we thank you for your participation. Let's get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Hamilton. Mary?
Thank you, Mark. Thrilled to be here. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to share this year's technology vision. As Mark mentioned, we've been doing this for more than 20 years. And just to put a little contextual historical framing on this, more than a decade ago, we predicted that every business will be a digital business. And today that could not be more true, especially driven by technology trends like artificial intelligence, AI. And when we think about our technology vision, we don't do it in isolation. We do it looking at the context of the world at large. We do it thinking about the evolution of technology and how those trends are changing. So if you flip to the next slide. Oh, actually, there we go. So AI is really at the core of a lot of what we'll be talking about today from the vision trends. But again, if we're looking at it historically, we can see the exponential growth of technology, right? PCs, internet, 4.5 billion users, 8 billion mobile phone users, $1 trillion in spending in cloud. And we're predicting that generative AI spend will exceed 140 billion annually by 2027. Right? So these technology curves are moving faster and faster. If you hit the next slide, let's think about technology through history, right? I kind of mentioned that every business is a digital business and we're at an inflection point. But let's talk about some of these past inflection points, right? Most of these technology developments, we can't imagine the world without them at this point. But here are some of the viewpoints at the time, right? So writing, the printing press was denounced that it would be information overload, right? People would become so overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge, and it would be confusing and harmful to them. Electricity, this magic on a grand scale, would kill more people than it would benefit. Obviously, that's not the case. The telephone, some said it would destroy privacy. Social gatherings, right? Those things wouldn't happen anymore. Empty concert halls, right? Because people are, using this new thing called the telephone. And then the internet, computer phobia, right? And there was more talk about antisocial behavior, replacing people, worried that intelligence was going to be on the decline, right? Is Google making us stupid? Was an article that came out. But if you hit the next slide, history tends to wash over those negative outlooks, right? And altogether, technology has decreased worldwide poverty, it's increased productivity and business efficiencies. It has enabled more mobility. It's created opportunity for equality, financial progress, and it's even created fun and entertainment. And you can see some of the statistics here around life expectancy, global literacy, et cetera. All right, next slide. So that really brings us to our an inflection point in history, one of our biggest inflection points. And this is really around AI beginning to meet and exceed human-like capabilities, right? So where we once adapted to new technologies, so we would change our habits for a new app, right, or a computer interface, now we're seeing the technology adapting to us. And it's taking on more and more human-like capabilities. It's learning how we speak, how we see, how we create. And it's understanding us like never before. And ideally, it's almost disappearing as it adapts to us. So we're seeing AI approach and exceed human capabilities in a lot of areas around creativity, productivity. And for example, right, by 2016, AI was performing better in handwriting and speech recognition. By 2022, it was outperforming in reading comprehension, language understanding, common sense completion of sentences. But AI is still lagging. Things like grade school math, right? It seems like that should be straightforward, but that's actually more complicated. Code generation. So there's still room to grow, but we're really seeing this new era of human potential. And it's a cycle, right? It's a cycle where technology is becoming more human-like, and then combining that capability with human capability, we're enhancing it to really improve productivity and improve creativity. So now when we talk about technology becoming more human-like, it's really creating unprecedented potential that's giving people superpowers. It's also democratizing the reach of that technology. So, we're no longer requiring advanced degrees to deliver and to use this technology. So go ahead and hit the next slide. So what does that mean in terms of business, right? And Mark mentioned that we do this survey every year of executives. So 87% of executives that we surveyed said that generative AI is going to disrupt their industry in the next 5 years. And it's going to cause disruption in 3 areas. It's going to reinvent every part of every business. It will change everything. It's going to redefine industry leaders. So we're going to see leapfrogging, and it's going to unleash human potential, right? It's going to unlock our own creativity, increase our own productivity. So I would say, as we look at this inflection point, there's obviously continues to be, like there were with other technologies, skepticism, but we're taking a positive outlook on this, and we're really thinking about how this has been evolving as we've been tracking it. So generative AI especially last year was really the year of experimentation, of trying this thing out, trying these things out, playing with applications. What we see for 2024 is really a year of scale as we start to, as users and business leaders start to define what are those areas in their enterprises, what are the use cases, what are the processes that can be redefined, that can be changed to really help reinvent their businesses. So that leads us to the theme of the vision. And as Mark hinted, it is human by design, right? We are seeing this breakthrough technology approaching human-like capabilities and in a way disappearing into the background. But what that means is that we need to be even more intentional in how we deploy this technology and these capabilities to maximize human potential. So that's, how do we improve productivity? How do we boost creativity? How do we drive better outcomes? How do we yield more satisfaction, right? Gratification, happiness, wellness, right? How do we increase people's net better off scores? And we think there's a huge potential to do that. I can't stress enough that we now have the chance to really reframe our relationship with technology and make it more human from the outset. So the themes and the trends that we have this year are really all about that change, right? Really creating opportunities for humans to use this at every single level. So let's dive into these trends. So the first one is a match made in AI. So if you can hit the next slide, please. All right, so this one is really about reshaping our interaction with knowledge. So it's ensuring a world where everyone is equipped with AI-powered, productivity-boosting personal assistants that supercharge their capabilities, creativity, and potential to achieve. So what does that mean? That means we're going to be interacting with knowledge, with information in new ways. In the past, we've done that through search. Think about it shifting now to becoming a synthesis, right? So if you think about from an enterprise standpoint, or even a consumer constituent standpoint, people are going to have more direct access to greater knowledge and capabilities and resources, right? We can take the drudgery out of work because we're going to be kind of taking that, we call it the kind of the dull work that people maybe don't want to do. Let's let AI do that, right? Let's give everyone a productivity boost. So when we think about interacting, right, it's about how do we get closer to real-time information, real-time recommendations in a more natural human way through an AI interface. And an example of this, a great place where we're seeing this really ramp up quickly to scale is around call centers, right, or chatbots. How do we use generative AI to enhance agents to respond quicker? So let me give you an example. Telefonica is helping their agents to respond to landlord queries about property rental contracts for network towers. And what this has done is it's improved their agent response by 30%, and it's increased their user experience scores by 66%. We're seeing this be used in internal IT desk service, in call center, chatbot, conversational AI, and we're starting to see this reach scale where it can be deployed for different use cases in really exciting new ways, right? But this is this new way of interacting with information. If you hit the next slide, meet my agent. All right, so again, this is AI powered, and this is really envisioning a world where AI powered agents are working on behalf of individuals. So like I talked about that, new ways of synthesizing and bringing recommendations, but they're doing it as part of an interconnected ecosystem. So AI has started to act as personal agents, but it's starting to go beyond that, right? Beyond responding to simple requests for information. It's really becoming empowered to act autonomously on our behalf. And eventually we're going to see these AI agents interact with each other, right? And so we don't have to be in the loop of advising and creating those connection points. They will start to happen. So let me give you an example of this. There's a company called Do Not Pay, and it's designed to help consumers save money by identifying unused subscriptions. It'll contest fines for you, parking tickets, etc. They integrated GPT-4 and AutoGPT into their software. And the first user of this was the CEO. And so he gave the agent access to all of his financial accounts. He was brave. And he said, gave the prompt of find me money. And the agent found $81 of unnecessary subscriptions. It found $37 in-flight Wi-Fi fee. But then it drafted emails to negotiate a percentage discount. So it not only went out and changed the subscriptions, it was able to negotiate a discount on their internet bill, but it also kind of wrote a letter to reduce that Wi-Fi fee. So he was able to start to have these checkpoints where normally it would have just come back and said, here's your subscriptions. Now it's actually creating a way to interact on his behalf. And you can imagine as these agents start to interact with each other, it will make things even easier for all of us. All right, next trend, the space we need. So creating value in new realities. This is really about creating rich, new, immersive worlds of personal interaction by extending our physical 2D worlds into 3D environments created using spatial computing, digital twins, augmented and virtual reality. So this does not have to be the full, I'm in a virtual reality headset. We are seeing more and more cases, more and more opportunities of augmenting through spatial computing. Generative AI, in this case, is an accelerant. It will help us create new content. We're exploring not just 2D content, but 3D content. How do you create these new worlds and environments? How do you get these environments to change in real time? So imagine you're doing training and you're not engaged. Could we change the environment in real time using generative AI? So I think as we continue to see this medium evolve, it will continue to disrupt. There's just a ton of opportunity here. We jokingly call this one, the metaverse is dead, long live the metaverse, right? We continue to see, especially in spaces like digital twins. Mars is a great example. They've created a digital twin of their factory, and they're able to drive efficiencies to do predictive maintenance through that digital twin work. We're seeing training that is incredibly powerful. We built a training called Avenues Virtual Reality, where we're helping in the public sector to do training around child protective services, so people can understand and have a natural interaction in what an environment might look like and have conversations in a much more realistic way. And that training really is absorbed in a much more powerful way when people can experience it through spatial computing. All right, and the last trend, our body's electronic. This is really about a new human interface. This trend is a little bit further out when we look at it, but it's really about using innovative embedded technologies such as AI-powered wearables, brain sensing neurotech, and eye and movement tracking to unlock a better understanding of us and our lives, our intentions, and then using those deeper insights to enhance the way we work and live. So this one is really about all the immense amount of data that we have about ourselves and how we can start to use this emerging suite of technologies like brain waves, heartbeats, skin temperature, where we don't have to create an interaction. It's just being captured about us, harnessed, and then used in a way that will help us understand our own bodies and our own intentions, and then start to create experiences out of that. So a great example of this, you can see in the top right corner there, it's a neurosensing headset from a company called Mendy, and it's much lower cost, much more resilient than the traditional electrodes that you put on your head and wires coming out of it. You can see it's pretty streamlined. And this is actually tracking the blood flow in your brain and helping to understand your focus and concentration. And you can actually use this paired up with an app We've built an app called Brain Gym, and it helps you train your concentration and focus. So we're taking that data from your brain and how you're focused, and we're helping you actually improve yourself by focusing and concentrating more and more. So I think the implication of this is we are going to use this new interface to help improve our own productivity, right? And it becomes seamless, again, by design. So let me wrap up here. If you hit the last slide. So again, the general theme is that we are in this inflection point around AI and how it is really reshaping and changing the technology, the way we interact, from the consumer, the constituent, public sector, to the work we do. It is truly, if we can harness this, we can create superhuman powers, superhuman capability, and improve our productivity. So I'm excited for the panel that we're going to have some discussions on some of these themes, and I'll hand it back over.
Thanks, Mary. My name is Jennifer Hall. I'm a managing director for Accenture here in Sacramento. And Mary, thank you for taking the time to take us through that. I think your slides on the things we have feared in the past was a great reminder of when we do have nothing to fear but fear itself. But it is wise to kind of be thoughtful and intentional about how and when we're using technologies, especially if we're looking at it. You don't want to bring too much to bear too. I know with Gen AI, that's a lot that comes up with my clients, is that there's some things that they don't need to have Gen AI for, and you want to be thoughtful about that for the amount of power it consumes. So thank you for that. I do know that there are going to be Q&A at the end of our panelist questions. We have a few panelist questions, but ahead of that, I'm excited for the group of panelists we have today, coming at from a couple different perspectives, from education, Mary continuing to provide some of the technology perspective. We have Rachel Zillner, who's the co-founder and CEO of Clutch here in Sacramento, rapidly growing community. If you haven't heard about them, you should. Really a great story for our region. We have Dr. Sidorkin, who's now the Chief AI Officer at Sacramento State, and Brian Wong, who's the Deputy Secretary of Innovation and Technology with the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. So we're going to go through with this group and get your thoughts on a couple of different areas. So Rachel, this first one's for you. The technology in the digital landscape has changed rapidly over the past year. How has your organization either adapted to or adopted these changes? And are there specific instances where technology has played a pivotal role in driving this change or innovation?
Thanks, Jen. Excited to be here. We have seen both internally with our clients, I guess I'll start with that. We're seeing internally some really big opportunities around generative AI, and it's that human element for us as an organization who supports clients. AI is everywhere. There's all kinds of cool things that are coming in, and people are trying to figure out which ones do I use and how might I use them, and what's safe to use. And from our alignment, it's how do we work with the humans to do organizational change management, human transformation work? Because while the tech is going to do the cool stuff that it does, we have to work with the people so that they can accept the tech. And a lot of that is finding out what the fears are that exist. Is this going to take my job? Is this going to make a change? And really relaying that, no, it's not. This is a partner that we get to make with AI so that we all go faster and better. As Mary was talking about, being able to remove a lot of those parts of the job that we don't love. We all have that 10 or 20% that's not our jam. So we can look to AI to create that space. And as an experience organization, it's wonderful to focus on change management and training to prepare the human capital in your organization to quickly gain that confidence and work with AI, because it's here. I was just at South by Southwest, and they said the first $1 billion company is going to be created by one entrepreneur with all AI. I'm like, okay, let's go, world. But it's a little bit about how I've seen it.
Well, thanks a lot, Rachel. Any comments from the rest of our panelists? Otherwise, I have another question ready to tee up. Okay, Dr. Sidorkin, this one's for you. Much of the 2024 tech vision centers around the evolution of generative AI. So how is your organization and the education industry at large responding to this change?
Well, I have to say that the AI as a technology affects different industries in a different ways. I think we need to recognize that there's no one universal way. In education and higher education, but also in K-12, on the business side, we're like everybody else looking for efficiencies and better work. However, on teaching and learning side, we are challenged with this unique kind of event because you need to understand that in education, so the curriculum design over many decades kind of created this chains, or you can maybe think of them as ladder with different steps that students climb to get to higher level thinking skills. And those some of this rungs of the ladder are now broken because students will just ask ChatGPT to write an essay for them and they won't learn anything. And it's hard for faculty to detect that. So there is a little bit of panic going on because it's not because higher ed people are exceptionally conservative or don't want to do new things. It's just because when we talk about disruptive innovation, it disrupts us in a very different way. It's immediate. We're not afraid of competition. It's just the students do this thing, more and more of them. And of course, we used to be able to control tools that we bring into classrooms. We don't anymore. It's just there. We have a very good learning science and theory of education where there is a teacher, there is a student, there's a peer group, there are instruments and tools. And none of the theorists actually imagined there would be something like AI that is kind of also kind of a tool, but it's a super cool tool. But it's also kind of an instructor. It could be a coach. It could be a tutor. It could be all of these things. So we don't really have an account for how that works. And some faculty try to police the situation, say, no, you're not supposed to use it. Well, it only works a certain way and actually has negative impact on equity. Some students who actually have a lot of resources and very good with AI, good luck catching them on using it. That's impossible. Students who are just starting to learn it, and they usually come from more a lower socioeconomic background, they have difficulties to do that, and they're caught easily. So you're punishing the wrong people. So in other words, that's sort of the dilemma for us. So we kind of need to restore this middle rungs of the ladder that climbs from, say, basic literacy to advanced writing. AI doesn't do anything to basic literacy. It doesn't do anything to advanced thinking skills like creativity, authenticity, critical thinking, and all of that. What it does, it destroys the middle range skills. And of course, we know that in theory, the solution is that we actually need to rebuild those kind of ladders. So we need to create different assignments that would imply or require the use of AI rather than forbid it. But that's in theory. In real life, every discipline actually has built its own chain of skills or chain of competencies, if you want. And those kind of very difficult to revise. You need a lot of time and support and money to do that, and time. So that's our biggest challenge. And of course, the university, like many other universities, we have the committees that try to figure out what the policy is, what the right way of using it. But in the world of policy, there is nothing worse than undercooked policy. So when you try to start with this position of panicking, and then you end up with very restrictive and kind of forbidding policy that will hurt students rather than help. So, but we also have a very active groups of faculty who are ready to do it, who are ready to revise their curriculum in a way that AI is actually used there without destroying the skills. See, that's our dilemma. I'm finishing here, but if we do nothing, we actually do have a real danger of de-skilling the whole population of students because the steps that we build for them are no longer working. So we need to actively rebuild those steps and create different assignments, different assessments for students, for us to use on students to assess their knowledge and their skills. So that's the biggest challenge. For that, we organize around that challenge with faculty groups, we have AI, we'll have AI champions in the fall in every college that will try to work with faculty And in the rest of the world, you kind of can wait for startups to come up with a cool solution for you. It doesn't work for us because there are no startups that are working on those things. So we have to do it ourselves. So a lot of this work is really kind of faculty dependent and faculty generated. And that's what we're trying to recognize and strategize about how we can best involve our faculty and students as well into this work.
Well, Dr. Sidorkin, we actually have a responsible AI framework we use at Accenture, so we're happy to send that over to you to help with the policy.
Sure.
Actually, I have three children who are in high school and college right now. It's really fascinating to me just to kind of observe how things are changing and to watch how my son's in a Cal State school, and to watch how some of their professors are integrating really mindfully how to use AI and teaching them to think differently, and then having them present out their findings standing and talking about it. So you eliminate some of those abilities to use a paper, but you're embracing Chat GPT. And Brian, this will go to your next question, but one of the studies we've done is that there's going to be a significant job loss, around 80 million jobs with AI, but an even more significant increase in jobs with about 117 million jobs being created with AI. Example job that we know is coming up is a prompt engineer, someone who can write really, really strong prompts to get the most out of your Chat GPT, and having that understanding and that EQ and that wide creative thinking to write a prompt that's very effective. And that job didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. Now that's going to become that already is a mainstream job that people are hiring for. So Brian, as we think about this from kind of a policy or a state perspective, tell me a little bit about the government's role in AI. There's a lot of conversation about how the internet wasn't regulated enough, and I know that we have the governor framework coming out, but what are you thinking about that, both from a regulation perspective, but also from job creation? And get interested in your perspective on both those.
Sure, and thanks for having me today. I'll apologize in advance. I'm a little bit under the weather, so if I sound a little nasally, my apologies. Yeah, I mean, the reality is there has to be some level of regulation. I mean, you mentioned the onset of the internet, and I think without regulation, this could quickly become a version of the wild, wild west, if not regulated correctly. The big challenge that I see is how do you balance the innovation piece and all the potential good that can come from this against the what I would say the more negative consequences, both unintended and intended. It's going to be a huge challenge, right? This is something I think that is a total new landscape for all of us. You look at Chat GPT is a great example. What was it? 100 million users in 2 months? Is that what if I understand correctly, right? I mean, that's unheard of, right? And as we talk about governance and things, how do you govern something that's moving that quickly, right? My thought really is it's going to be less about the technology or technical requirements and more about putting guardrails in place, a framework of responsibly being able to evaluate and implement Gen AI. I think that's really going to be the focus going forward. Now, I can speak from a state of California perspective. There was an executive order last year where we were, among other things, required to document the most significant use cases and associated risks with those use cases. We just recently released general guidelines for procurement and training, and much more to come from that. But I think we've made a good initial step in that regulation. But again, I think it's something that's going to be very fluid and very challenging. Again, just how do you balance that, right? I mean, there's so much good, like we talked about earlier. There's so much good that can come from this. We could probably spend hours talking about use cases, right? But then you look at the flip side, right? The hallucinations, potential security concerns, things of that nature. We just have to really account for that. So yeah, I think the government's off to a good start. It obviously has a role, and obviously partnering as well with academia and private industry as well. I think that's going to be the key to success here.
Absolutely. And I'll just give a quick prompt. If you do have any Q&A questions, feel free to drop them in. We have a couple more panelist questions, but then we'll go to the audience. You know, Brian, one of the things that I kind of explain to people is when you're thinking about Gen AI is feel like we could either go the Matrix route or the Star Wars route, and both those obviously show my age. But if you think about the use cases, if you think about Star Wars, it feels very natural in the integration with and the interaction with robots versus the Matrix, which really went down a different path. But you think about kind of the assumption of Gen AI being used in both those. So it's kind of what I'll talk to my clients about or help them understand the models. So Mary, this question is going to go over to you. But we do think about, and I alluded to it a little bit with the change in the number of jobs and the impact of the future of work. I know you're on the cutting edge of seeing this and see it every day in what you do at the Accenture Tech Labs. But what are you kind of seeing across the industry as a whole, or how are you using AI with your teams today, or thinking about it? And then I'd invite the other panelists to kind of share where they are, if they are using it today too.
Yeah. So I think it's fascinating. And I mentioned last year was a year of experimentation, and this year we're starting to see that scale, but it really requires a foundation, right? It is going to drive reinvention, but it requires that businesses, organizations have a digital core, right? They've got the data foundations, the cloud platforms, et cetera, that they are thinking about the processes and ways of working and how those are going to change, thinking about how to upskill and reskill their talent, workforce, and then building capabilities in responsible AI, right? That framework by which we're thinking about the future and doing that by design intentionally right up at the front. That's critical. And then doing it in a way that has a deep understanding of function and industry and perspective. So it's really about bringing all those pieces together. But we are absolutely exploring and looking at ways that we can use this from the operations that we drive. How do we take cost out of that? We're always looking to improve cost takeout. Gen AI is going to be one of those tools that will help. Think about code generation is a great example. We use it internally for our own internal communications. We invested in a company called Writer, and we're partnering with them to gear up our internal marketing team so that I think we used to get like 75 million emails that were newsletters, 75 million emails that were newsletters, right? Kind of information. We've now combined that into one Good Morning Accenture email that comes out. And that's driven a lot by generative AI. So those are places where I think we're starting to see the scale developed. And then we're continuing to experiment. I have my own digital twin. Her name is Mair, M-A-I-R. And she has been trained up on all the things around the vision. She was sort of my partner in crime at CES. So she helped folks put together itineraries and know everything that was happening at CES. While I have a pretty good pulse on it, I couldn't know everything that was going on. So she was able to augment and help and be places. She goes and gives presentations when I can't. So I think we're going to continue, but it's not perfect, right? And there's still a lot of evolution that needs to happen. So I think we're going to continue to experiment and see the stuff grow into scale.
Rachel, Mary mentioned a little bit about the ways of working, and I really can't kind of underestimate that enough about how important it is to really be thoughtful about the ways that people change how they work together. And do you have any comments on that, or what you've seen that kind of might either challenge that or underscore it?
Yeah, I think it's more important than ever that we have a higher EQ in how we're engaging with our coworkers as AI comes through. So what we're doing with our clients is we're focusing on teaching through different trainings that we offer. And there's one that has an acute focus on listening skills. It's all about how are we listening to what people are saying, what clues are we picking up on or not picking up on, which really translates into this prompting that we're talking about, right? Is if I'm really paying attention, I'm going to pick up on the different things that are available in that space. We're focusing on thought leadership. We're focusing on problem solving skills, some of that executive function. These are not things that we teach in school, right? They haven't been a part of that. And unless you go through an MBA or a PhD program, you're not generally getting this in your K through 12 sort of space. I would also just love to throw in, my co-founder and I founded the first women-led, women-founded venture capital fund here in Sacramento. And we're seeing some really cool stuff come through. That there's one that's called strive.io, and they're focusing on the education part of K through 12. And when kids are not doing well in school, is it a function of what they're learning, or is it the emotional and intelligence piece of like maybe something's going on at home, maybe there's something extra, and giving teachers an extra tool to educate through to those students to be able to reach more of the folks who are in the classroom. Or I've worked with some other entrepreneurs. We do these fun things, and I think every human should do this exercise. Get on Chat GPT-4 and go build yourself a board of directors, and you could make up whoever you want, build that character in there. And then you ask them questions. Hey, what should I do with this? And what should I do with that? And you can have Steve Jobs sit on your board, or a past president, whoever you want to pick, your bestie, whatever. And it's just kind of a fun way to engage with this stuff so we can get our toes wet and then start being able to talk to our coworkers about, how are you doing this? How does this work? For me personally, I now plan my vacations through AI. Like, hey, I want to go here. I want to be near water. And it gives me all this great stuff. Saves a ton of time, friends. It's been great. And industry will continue to evolve as we look at these different options, as wonderful people imagine them, and we get to think about how to put them into place in our workplaces.
I think it's the technology is an enabler, and it always has been. So being able to really kind of use that effectively is critical. You mentioned another thing about the upskilling and reskilling, and Dr. Sidorkin, when you're thinking about how education will change, any thoughts there on how you've been seeing, like how you think that might evolve with the new skills that we're seeing, the new ways of working?
Yeah, thank you. We have different groups of employees here on higher ed. So the faculty probably are not in danger because students come to us not for knowledge, but for relationships. So the education is a lot more relational than informational, as we find out now. However, I think we have a staff, and of course, if we were smart, we would think about what needs do we have in 10 years and retrain our existing employees. Like if you support clerical staff, you probably make a better advisor than a random person from the street because you've already invested in the institution. So we can tell that our demand for clerical support staff will decrease in a few years, but we still have other areas where people are underserved. Students are underserved, like in advising, the residential area and all of that. And I think for large businesses, this is an answer as well. When we go through technological disruption, we usually fire a bunch of people, lay them off, and then hire different people, which is really a waste of human capital. On the job training, if you have a kind of a strategy for your workforce needs in 5 and 10 years, allows you to save the human capital, retrain people, and prepare them for the new world in which we'll be living. So in this sense, higher ed is not an exception. We're just like any other large organization. And of course, people worry about job losses, and they are doing it for a reason. There is a danger of that. So I think that's where the government should really step in and incentivize in many ways the on-the-job training and creating this, workforce plan for the next 10 years, and that's who we need. And so I think that's how we should go about that.
Well, I think that's a great way to transition over to Brian. Any comments on that, or kind of what we're seeing coming out of at least the California government, or some of the perspective your agency has?
I mean, just from a general perspective, I think for us, it's more really about augmenting and not necessarily replacing staff, right? We're not, that's not really the conversation. We look at Gen AI as another tool to help enable people in their jobs, increase productivity. As part of that, I'm sure there will be some level of upskilling and training as we go, right? But yeah, I think the technology is going to help people in their jobs. It's going to help people that consume our services have a better experience, and then that's really what we see with the onset of Gen AI.
Well, I do know that one thing that we're doing at our company is the ability to parse like your job out by the skills it requires, and then also forecasting where we think those skills are going to be in 5 years, like what the ideal skill is. And then you look at the gaps you have and have targeted upskilling. So when you think about, you're not spreading peanut butter really thin about trying to retrain something, into a 180-degree pivot, but it's really making those adjustments that can allow someone, just like Dr. Sidorkin said, continuing to retain the benefits of that human capital while giving them really very specific training to allow them to upskill. I think that's a really powerful component that sometimes maybe gets lost, that upskilling ability is going to be a little easier to identify using AI. So, well, let me go to the last question here, and then it does look like we have a couple Q&A, so I'll hit those next. But if you do have anything you'd like to get answered, especially since we have these 3 different perspectives, please feel free to chime in. And this question will be for the entire panel, but and we've touched on a little bit, but let's go in and a little deeper here. But how can business, education, and civic leaders, government leaders, effectively harness the potential of AI while ensuring inclusivity and sustainability, equity? What actionable steps are you considering, or would you recommend considering, to navigate the ethical, social, and economic implications of AI adoption for a brighter and more equitable future?
Well, if I can pitch into this one, I think we have actually major competition, huge war going on among the major providers of AI, which is great, right? So we all love that. However, they will never serve like smaller markets. Who's going to do AI development for, I don't know, for the blind people? Who's going to do it for more vulnerable, smaller markets that usually big players ignore? And we have a huge ecosystem of startups that's around AI. And I think that's kind of our role is to make sure that they don't all chase the same wild goose, because there are some populations that only governments can, or philanthropic organizations can serve. They're just too small to matter for the large market. And I think that's the one way to ensure it. And I totally agree with Brian, but some regulations absolutely needed. Like the fine-tuning models should be all transparent. We need to know what kind of rules AI companies put in there, right? Also, what kind of raw data they feed in it, because that seems to be a mystery. Nobody knows where this comes from, because raw data spills over into their answers. I mean, their biases and all of that comes from the raw data, not from intentional tuning. So I think that part also needs to be regulated in a way that it's transparent to the public, so that we understand what's going on in those companies.
Absolutely. Like the knowledge of what the models are that they're leveraging and where they train, that's critical and needs to be transparent. Rachel, Brian, or Mary, any comment?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rachel.
We'll go Rachel and then Mary.
Okay, I would say access matters. Being able to create access points in your organization for folks to engage with it, whether it's picking up Copilot for everyone who has, or doing some sort of a reimbursement for employees to have access to ChatGPT-4. Here in our organization, we have built a coalition of folks who are using different things to come together and talk to each other about how they're participating in that. It's a brand new group, so it's like baby, but I'd be happy to share insights as time goes by on how that's working or not working. Certainly an organization needs to really lay in on those DEI frameworks that we've built in our organizations, because that is the framework that helps us get there. And I would look to being very intentional about how you plan to use it in your organization. And I'm just going to give an example. I was thrilled to see that Dove, the brand that, does soap, who's been so big about real women and women's bodies and what real women look like, came out and decreed that they're only going to use real women to depict women in video and their commercialization, etc. And I think that's a really important piece, because as AI is learning from what we have available for it to learn from, we have a deep history that's not certainly as representative as our culture and our communities are today. So we have to be even more intentional that as we're feeding information into the different technologies we choose to use, that we're thinking about those groups that might not be included historically. So I hope that helps a little bit, but it's going to be with great intention. Certainly, whoever you're designing those intentions with should be a diverse thought group. If you all look the same or have the same background, you're the same age, we're going to miss people. So it's important that as you build those coalitions, you're very thoughtful about who is participating in that room too.
Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that. So I was just going to talk a little bit more broadly about really establishing a set of responsible AI principles and looking at across, we've identified 6 key risk areas: bias and harm. The bias is exactly what you're talking about, Rachel, right? The inherent bias that might propagate in models, right? Leading to toxic outputs, discrimination for certain races, socioeconomic classes, age groups, making sure that you're monitoring and very quickly addressing if some of those biases come through. Liability and compliance, unreliable outputs, right? The hallucinations, confidentiality and security, making sure that, the data going in isn't being exposed in ways that you didn't expect. Sustainability, the amount of energy that these consume, and even, tuning a model, right? The huge, 15 times more energy needed for a 2.5% improvement in accuracy, right? The closer you get to accuracy, the more energy it takes, right? And how do you, balance that model for accuracy versus energy use? And then, the last piece is around workforce transition and making sure, the things we talked about upskilling and reskilling are being addressed in a responsible way. So when we think about organizations, really need to have some sort of center of excellence, of responsible AI principles, and putting those in place. And we, in the research we've done, we've seen that 96% of organizations support some level of government regulation around AI, but only 2% of companies have identified as having fully operationalized responsible AI across their organization. So there's a huge gap, and there's a huge way to go. But we need organizations to be thinking about this.
I think that's the equity component of access to technology and understanding of technology becomes even more critical, which I know is a big policy consideration here in California, with making sure that there is access for all, and the ability for all to really to understand how to use the technology, be exposed to it, to be able to have access to it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to one of our Q&A here. And this, again, any of the panelists, welcome to answer this. But from a business perspective, how do we ensure AI industry leaders do not undermine innovation and competition in this market? Very, very valid question, kind of given where we are with social media apps these days too.
Well, can I say there's no monopoly now in the market. I think there is a lot of competition, like Claude, Anthropic, or the new Grok that has a Llama model underneath. It's the Copilot and all of them. So there is a lot, not competition. But where it comes, I think, into play is that for a large organization to adopt anything kind of AI, they don't like a retail solution where everybody uses hundreds of different tools. So it has to be enterprise level solutions, and there are very few of them. It's Microsoft, it's the AWS, Amazon Web Services, and OpenAI offers its own enterprise, but it doesn't compare at all with what Microsoft can offer. So I think that's where, and of course, some of these big companies are monopolistic. It's sort of their nature. I'm not going to name the names here, but they're trying to sell you the whole thing. And I think that's where regulations should also come in. There has to be a right of a la carte services. The enterprise doesn't mean that you monopolize every aspect of the organizational infrastructure. It's just very difficult to, and then the monopolies become worse performing than some of the alternative. You can get out of it because you already signed the huge contract. So I'm not sure how to solve it, but there is the danger of monopoly comes from that. not from individual use. I don't think there is danger yet anywhere nearby.
Yeah, and I think there is going to be opportunity to both succeed and fail on a lot of those risk factors that we talked about, right? There's room for startups to make potentially big strides. I think also, from the functional standpoint, right, really rethinking the processes, thinking about it from an enterprise standpoint, going deep and having enterprise level focus, I think will also be a game changer and help disrupt. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, the large companies have a lot of money to throw at this, and that drives certain behaviors. But I do think there's still a lot of room for disruption. We're still pretty early in the cycle of the development of this tech.
And I think that, also if you could look at it, AI is going to enable like the one person to do a lot more than they were before. And you go to Rachel's example of the $1 billion enterprise with one person, they're certainly going to be able to make more nimble decisions than a large scale enterprise. So you actually might see a competition being increased. So, so next question here, and I think this is a really good one. And Dr. Stork, and I know that you referenced a little bit about some of the hallucinations, and Mary, I know this is a topic in our responsible AI, so I might hit you two up first, but how do we evaluate the accuracy of the information of generative AI if you don't have any like previous knowledge of the subject that you're asking it about? Like, how do you know what it's telling you is true?
Well, I think it comes from experience. I mean, once you're using it for a few months, you will know which kind of information are likely to have hallucinations in it and which kind of information very unlikely to have hallucinations. So there is no, sometimes they measure percentage. It's really not an accurate description. Like if you're asking for a list of references, I'll bet you there will be one of them that's made up. If you're asking a general question about well-known theory, there will be no hallucinations. And of course, the newer model have much fewer of that. So, I mean, ChatGPT-4 has fewer, and then Claude, I'm sorry for that, Claude 3 actually has a lot fewer of them. So when in doubt, check. I think that's the only way to do it. And there's also a number of specialized tools within ChatGPT. There are custom GPTs, and one of them called Scholar. So if you wanna check it, again, I wouldn't really, don't make life-changing decisions based on ChatGPT advice or any of them. That's just exercise some common sense. And of course, the problem with hallucinations, the same thing that makes them hallucinate also makes them creative. So it's not easy to solve. So we probably have to learn to live with some level of hallucinations forever. And of course, when we all were introduced to the internet, and those of you who older remember that, oh my God, internet is mostly garbage. How can we trust it? Well, we somehow learn, right, to distinguish between reliable and not reliable, and we're still around, and nobody, drinks anything poisonous because they read on the internet that it would be good for you. So maybe some people do. But anyway, it's the same thing. It's a basic kind of media literacy that we used to teach. We also now have to teach basic AI literacy, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's always going to come down to critical thinking, right? But better models, better data that are going to improve the level of hallucination. We've also been playing with, can you have multiple agents? Sometimes it's a perspective, right? Could you have multiple agents with different perspectives kind of argue, right, and fine tune each other? And I think there's probably going to be opportunity and as that technology grows as well.
And Rachel, you probably were sent to a hotel. Did it exist when you showed up there, when you used it for your vacation planning?
So far, so good. But I can tell just one example that was really fun about the accuracy of the information. When we were setting up networking in our building, the gentleman who was working on it was using AI to help, navigate through some of the things. And he wanted to set up a particular port to have a particular type of access. And the AI said, I can't do that. That would be immoral of me to do so. And so he had an argument with the AI back and forth for about a half an hour about why in this specific case it wasn't immoral. And eventually the AI said, you're right. In that case, here's how you do it. And I thought, well, that's really interesting as we continue to explore how we're going to talk to generative AI in the future. So I don't know.
But that sounds like that's a good cocktail conversation, Rachel.
Ah.
So
I can introduce you to him.
well, if no other questions, I'm going to turn this over to the GSEC chair, Barry Broom. And thank you very much to our panelists for making the time, Trolls is going to be joining us today. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining today and for the perspective you provided, for helping us to think about it from the different perspectives. There's a lot more to come on this, but really having thoughtful, transparent conversations is a great way to understand and to consider some of the benefits and the changes we're going to see as a result of this new technology. So thank you all very much for your time today. And Trolls, over to you.
Thank you, Jen. Really appreciate your moderation today, which was excellent. And thank you to Accenture for the partnership and to our panelists. It was a really stimulating discussion. I've been eagerly listening throughout and appreciated all the thoughts. I think if there's one way to look at this is really generative AI and AI in general this is not a joke. This is not a product. This is not a fad. It is a transformational technology is almost an understatement. I mean, we're going to have to go to the great civilizational moments to try to find equivalents, right? Like the internal combustion engine, the advent of the internet. And when you look at the internal combustion engine, for example, there were places that became, world leading in that technology. Detroit, Cologne, Paris, Stuttgart, all these places where the engines were made and where cars were innovated on, et cetera. And that's one thing that we're obviously thinking about at GSEC is how do we tap into this in terms of technology development. But there's also the other aspect of it, which I think you all talked really eloquently around, is how do you ready society? Because of course there's the old horse and buggy conversation, right? So the places that actually enabled the facilitation of automobiles as a new transportation technology became tremendously successful, even if they were not the places where they were built, right? So the United States is a great example of that. We built the interstate system, but before that, we were one of the first places to build roads that were paved well enough to people that actually drive on them, right? So they weren't just taken out to taking them out to like little driving courses for fun and games. They actually became an enabler of economic growth. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about at GSEC, and we're about to launch our next strategic plan, and it's really going to have AI woven into it in a variety of ways. I also really appreciated all the examples you shared. I'm going to have to look at this digital twin concept. I don't know what we're going to name my digital twin yet. The creativity was great there. But we are already using AI in a variety of ways in our marketing efforts and our graphic design. We've done some really interesting work there in our business development work. We're actually leveraging that to potentially identify incentives and technical assistance programs for companies. And then over the next 3 years in their strategic plan, as Jennifer, you will know, because you're sitting on our competitiveness council, we'll be talking about how do we ready our talent, our workforce for AI, so we can become really good at applying artificial intelligence across the region, so we don't wind up the last people with the buggy. How do we enable business growth through leveraging AI? So how do we actually disseminate information? Obviously world-leading companies like Accenture and Clutch, you all know this stuff, you've got it, but there's a lot of companies out there that could really benefit tremendously from receiving not just information, but also training on how to apply AI throughout their business. And then finally, how do we as an organization continue doing things like this webinar, information sharing, ensuring that there is, to some of Brian's points around policymaking, how do we ensure that there is a rich and solid conversation out in our local communities around how do we facilitate good decisions around policy, I think Dr. Sidorkin, you made the point about, hasty policy is bad policy, right? So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. Look forward to continuing engaging with you all over the next few years on that topic. So in other words, thank you so much for educating me. I learned a ton. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the conversation, and appreciate everyone who joined us as well today for on the audience side. I think that wraps us up.
Thank you all. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.